That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello and welcome to episode 60 of PvA Radio. I am one of your hosts, Luke Croft. Joining me as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellowkline. Cody, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Sorry I missed out on last week's episode.
It's all right, man. It's all right. We are happy to have you back. Missed your thoughts on The Last of Us. Here at the top, and with 30 seconds, give me your thoughts on how much of The Last of Us was shown during State of Play last week.
Too much.
Oh, that's all. He only needed 2 words, ladies and gentlemen. Also joining us today, the distinguished Lawrence Hunt.
Distinguished. Fancy.
And the ball is rolling on getting Lawrence Hunt to be a thing.
This is who I am now.
What would your October pun be, though, if your name was Lawrence? Because right now, you have the perfect pun name with Scary Haunt.
Yeah, you're right. I'll have to think on that and get back to you.
Okay. All right. Will do. This is PvA Radio. We get together each and every week over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio on Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article. And Larry, what would we like people to do with that?
You want to hide a walkie-talkie under your best friend's bed. And at night, you start making ghost noises till they wake up. And then you just echo in the most ghostly voice you can. Careful, careful, careful. And also spam that emote in the chat.
That's right, boys and girls. And if you can't catch these shenanigans live, you can see them the very next day over on youtube.com/PvA Radio, where we break it out topic by topic, or you can watch the entire video in its entirety. I always stumble on that one in this rigmarole here at the top. But moving on, or you can listen to us on podcast services everywhere, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Luminary, where Conan O'Brien continues to just fucking revolutionize this medium. My favorite podcaster, the only podcaster, some may say.
The hero of podcasting. It was dead until Conan resuscitated it.
Simply by being grossly famous. So... walkie-talkies. Let's talk about this for a second. I know we got a lot to get to. But, so, gone are the days of walkie-talkies being just fucking awesome. Because back in the day, before cell phones, it was awesome having walkie-talkies, right?
Yeah.
Did you play with walkie-talkies as a kid, Cody?
Not really.
Oh my gosh.
I just remember them being a thing in movies.
Oh, man.
My first cell phone was actually that. No, that's not true. My first cell phone was a Nokia, and you could like destroy a car with it. But my second cell phone was that flip phone that also doubled as a walkie-talkie.
Oh, with the Nextel push-to-talk?
Similar, but it wasn't the Nextel thing.
Well, I'll tell you this right now. A guy we went to school with named Jacob Savage used to use that push-to-talk all the time in like 2009, years after it was a thing. So... yeah, I played with walkie-talkies all the time as a kid. And one time I was playing with my best friend, and we were playing like we were army men, and we were talking about how it was clear and we were ready to advance into this room. And then a third voice came on and said, "Okay." And so I think that I may have gotten a SWAT team into a very hairy situation on that evening. So my apologies. Anyway, that's all I've got. Any other stories here about walkie-talkies at the top?
Walkie-talkies. We need to bring those back.
That's true. Walkie-talkies and yo-yos, baby. Coming back. 2020.
Yo-yos never died.
Did yo-yos never die?
No, people do cool shit on YouTube.
Oh, damn. I should go on there more often.
Yeah, you got to go into that YouTube yo-yo wormhole.
Oh my gosh. You'll watch one video and then all you'll get served is yo-yo videos. I watched one video of Ben Shapiro getting owned on live television, and then all of my YouTube recommendations became watch this liberal get destroyed, watch this person get destroyed. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, YouTube. Get your shit together. But
the algorithm at work.
YouTube has a cool feature now where you can hit the little 3 buttons next to the video, and you can say, I don't want to see this. It asks you why, and you can say, I don't want to see videos based off of this previous viewing that I've done, and it'll knock it out. So I did that and haven't seen any videos since. Thanks, YouTube. So if you're getting tired of seeing us on YouTube.
And if you haven't seen Ben Shapiro get owned on BBC, it's worth a view.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. All right, guys, let's jump into it here at the top. Only thing for housekeeping, we're back into the swing of things with the PvA Nightly Rundown over on twitch.tv/PvA Radio at 9 o'clock. Stop by sometime. I'm adding some elements to the show. I've got some ideas rolling around in my brain that I want to throw in, make it more interactive. So, yeah, make sure you come by for that. But other than that, I think we're ready to jump into this, and let's get the show started like we get every show started with what have you been playing? And Larry, let's start with you tonight. What have you been playing, my friend?
Played a little Overwatch this week. Still loving it. And Apex, but I don't want to talk about Apex yet because that's my topic later.
Spoiler alert. All right, Cody.
Well, your boy got 2 months of Game Pass for $2, so he's been playing quite a bit. I've been playing Gears 5, and take this with a grain of salt. I have not played a Gears game since the first one came out, and I didn't even beat that. So I knew what to expect in terms of gameplay, but I haven't kept up with the story. I heard great things about this one, so I decided to give it a try. I have no plans to play the multiplayer, but I've been playing the campaign, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I didn't know the character. I know the characters were introduced in the last one in 4, so this is my first introduction to them. But they do like this 3-minute long video at the up top that kind of summarizes everything that's happened before, like previously on Gears, and then dumps you right into it. And I feel like they do a pretty good job of catching you up and introducing who these characters are, and I'm actually really interested to see where it goes. So there's a certain point in the campaign where it evolves into something more than just a linear Gears game, and that's the point where I just hit. And so I'm really enjoying it. It kind of opens up a little bit. I like the main character a lot, Kate. She's really cool. She's not just another space bro. And so yeah, I mean, it's the same solid cover-based shooting, but I guess a little bit more open. So I'm really enjoying it. And there's a really cool vehicle that you unlock. That's kind of like the way you travel around. Sort of, it's the equivalent of the boat in God of War, and it feels just as good. So I'm enjoying that so far. I also picked up Outer Wilds, not Outer Worlds. I almost typed Outer Worlds into the show notes.
I don't know the difference between them anymore. It's just one game to me in my brain.
Yeah. Which is a really fun kind of time loop indie that came out earlier this year. It's based around kind of exploring a solar system. You have 30 minutes and then the sun explodes and you die and you wake up again. And it's all about learning. There's no combat. There's a little bit of puzzle solving, but it's basically about going out into the solar system and learning about this long lost alien race, dying, understanding what you just learned, and then going back out there. And so I think it's a really, really creative game. I would encourage anyone who has Game Pass to play it. I don't know how long it is. It's probably not very long, but it kind of reframes the way you kind of think about gameplay evolution in the game, because it's not really evolving gameplay. I mean, you're responding to each particular planet's conditions, but it's more about just learning. Every game's about learning, but this just makes it more explicit.
I'm always fascinated when a game can be fun and not have combat, because so many games, that's what it's about. It's just the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the writing is really, really quirky and fun. The beginning of it reminds me a lot of Jak and Daxter. Not just because the environment kind of looks like that opening village, but just kind of the playful, very off the wall tone of it. I've been playing a little bit of Apex, but I also won't say anything because that's largely Larry's topic. I just jumped in because of season 3. I'll leave it at that. And then I've been playing a ton of Borderlands 3, and we will talk about this game at length for my topic in a different light. This game is dumb as hell, but I enjoy it nonetheless.
What about it? I've heard people criticizing like the writing for being dumb, or are you just saying as a concept?
I mean, there's a lot. The writing is not great. At times it's terrible. And it's largely because they've chosen, much like the rest of the game, not to evolve anything since 2012 or whatever, when the last one came out. And so the humor has aged about as well as you'd think. And they clearly wrote some of these jokes in like 2015. So yeah, the writing is not great, but the shooting is a lot better than in either of the other two. And so I can largely ignore the writing because I've been playing with my brother mostly. So it's really just a solid excuse to get in there and shoot stuff and get a bunch of guns. And I mean, I'm used to the only other looter shooters I've played recently are Division and Destiny. And I forgot just how many guns in Borderlands there are. Like their tagline is they always like throw a bazillion guns at you. And they really do. Like every second you're finding a new gun, and they're always really fun and really wacky. That's where the humor kind of comes in. Just the ridiculous nature of some of these guns, and how powerful they make you feel. So I think the gameplay is really solid, and that's kind of what's keeping me going. I literally just play it as, I think the best way to talk about it is, I think Joshua Rivera over at Kotaku called it a potato chips game, where once you eat one, you can't stop eating them, but after you're finished, you feel kind of terrible about yourself. And that's exactly what it is. It's just like empty calories, but while you're in the middle of it, it's really enjoyable.
Cool. So let's see. I've also jumped back into Apex last night just because of season 3, and again, Larry's topics, we'll get there when we get there. For as much as I fucking hate Madden, I am in my 3rd season as a cornerback for the Green Bay Packers, and so I've been just playing that really whenever I get a spare few minutes every day, and I'm having fun with it, but there's still a ton of problems. Nothing new to report from the Madden really sucks story front, but trust me, there's probably much to be uncovered. I did have a scare with my television on Friday, though. I was off on Friday, and my screen just kept randomly going black. Like, I have I looked it up, and apparently Vizio has something called the black screen of death. And I was like, oh my gosh, where like your
screen turns black in October and the ghosts of the dead crawl out and drag your soul to hell. It's horrible.
See, that would be way cooler than what was happening. But it turns out that I think my cat had just gotten behind the television and made the power cable come a little loose. And so I just had to reset it, and it was all good. But I had a little bit of a scare there. I also play. Oh, go ahead.
You've got to understand that Luke loves that TV.
Oh my gosh,
probably more than his wife.
I love my television so much. I no comment on the latter half of that statement. I did play through one time the Medieval demo that was released, and I never played the original game, which I think the enjoyment you're going to get out of that game is probably predicated on whether or not you have prior memories of it, because I did not have a ton of fun with it from a gameplay perspective. But I love, like, obviously I love Halloween. October, the greatest month of the year.
Amen.
And my favorite Halloween thing is like the cartoony, spooky kind of things. Like I love sitcoms that do Halloween specials. I love cartoons that do Halloween specials. We used to have, when I was a kid, this like McDonald's VHS of Ronald McDonald Halloween or something, and I like wore that tape out watching it so much because I loved it so much. So I love what Medieval is like as a concept in this cartoony kind of over the top Halloween world. But from just a gameplay standpoint, to me, it's like, well, this seems really old. Like it, and I don't have a ton of I never played it, so I don't have any memories to connect back to it. So I was planning on like buying it simply for the aesthetic, but after playing it, I was just like, this doesn't connect with me. Probably just gonna get Luigi's Mansion instead.
Nice.
This seems way more fun. But
play as Luigi.
So that's what I've been playing. All right, let's jump into it. I'm gonna kick us off with our bonus topic here at the top, because this actually broke today, and I didn't see it until about an hour before our show. Actually, this is an article from Engadget written by Chris Holt, reporting that Sony has opened up PS4 cross-platform multiplayer access to all developers. So, if you guys don't remember the big kerfluffle, I think that's the second time I've used the word kerfluffle tonight, so 2 points for me. Last year when Fortnite came out for the Switch, they announced cross-play, cross-progression across different platforms, and Sony was the holdout for it. The concession that Sony made was, we are going to add this feature in as a beta and not open it up to everybody. So they added it to Fortnite to begin with, and since then they've opened it up on other games as well, including Rocket League, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Dauntless, Paladin, Smite, and Realm Royale. All have crossplay. The beta and I think it was just the beta for Call of Duty Modern Warfare was cross-platform as well. But now Sony just kind of announced in an aside in a Wired article that was talking about cloud, their goals in cloud gaming. Just kind of mentioned like, oh yeah, we've taken this out of beta, opened it up to all developers. So, and from what I understand, it really is just like an on-off. Like, developers can just say, okay, we want to turn cross-platform play on. And so I imagine we're going to start to see a lot more games kind of adopting this as standard for themselves. What are you guys' reactions to this here at the top?
I'm actually surprised. I thought that it would take some big moment where Sony was really losing some business over this for them to make this decision. And I'm really curious about why now. Maybe the experiment with Fortnite showed them that they weren't going to lose sales, at least with it. I don't know. But I guess I'm just curious about where this decision came from.
I mean, it's about time, right? It's probably notable that it's occurring both for the beta for Modern Warfare and kind of like right before the release of that game, considering all the kind of the existing between Call of Duty and Sony, which I think you guys talked about last week, the exclusive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this is good news. I thought it'd take them a lot longer because it literally always takes Sony longer to do anything. And I figured this would just be something that they roll out next generation and have just kind of when they do the big blowout for whatever PS5 is, use it as a really great talking point. I'm confused about the way they chose to roll out this news, because this is the second time that they've released a pretty big news item in a really odd way. They
with
announced
Wired.
The departure. This week.
Oh,
they
yeah.
The departure of Sean Layden, I believe it was, just in a tweet, and they didn't clarify anything about anything. They didn't release a statement. They just put it out in a tweet. And I'm not going to do the tinfoil hat to connect those two. I just think it's odd that they chose to release the news in this way.
Yeah. I think to Larry's point about like why now, and to your point, Cody, about why like this is my answer. I think why now is because Sony realizes this should have been done ages ago. You know, and I think the functionality's been there, and it's pretty well documented that we've known that functionality has been there. I can't remember exactly what game it was, but I think it was Rocket League that accidentally turned it on.
Yeah.
And the developers were like, oh yeah, it really is just like a switch force to flip. But I think they dug their heels in so firmly prior to the Fortnite mess that you have to I think they just kind of needed it to be this slow burn out until the point where I think today, I mean, that's a pretty big list of games there. And represents a pretty big player base, especially when you start throwing Call of Duty Modern Warfare in there, to the point where crossplay is starting to feel standard. And so I think Sony is smart enough to recognize, like, hey, you can't make a big fan moment out of this, release a video and a big announcement and get it circulating around everywhere, because we've been asking for this for ages, and we villainized Sony over the fact that they haven't included it. And so it's like the excitement that they would have tried to drone up in releasing this, it's like it was only created by your own stubbornness, and so I just don't think it would have played well. So I think this is,
everyone would have responded like Cody, the about time.
Yeah. So I think that's why it was now and why it was like this, because there's just not a lot of room for fanfare there.
Yeah, it's just them trying to drum up hype for this is totally undeserved, because this is something that has been possible and should have been a thing a while ago. I'm excited for I guess it takes a little bit more work, but to bring this into kind of games that have been on the market for a while. So I know, are they doing this with Destiny? Have they talked about that?
The cross save is available in Destiny right now.
Cross save is available with Destiny, but not cross play.
Right. Yeah. No announcements on that front yet. But yeah, Destiny's a big one I think people are asking for. I'd love to see Overwatch.
Yeah, Overwatch, Siege,
Apex Legends.
I'd like to see, Apex Legends and Blackout, Call of Duty. Talking about the Call of Duty partnership, I think that'd be great too. Yeah, this is good for players. It's just taking this long.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into our actual topics. Just wanted to throw that one in here at the top. Our thoughts on crossplay have been pretty well documented on this podcast, so nothing really new there to hash out. Speaking of Destiny, though, I want to talk about Destiny, free-to-play Destiny, Destiny 2 Shadowkeep, and the future of Bungie. A lot of really interesting news coming out from Bungie this week, and my chair is sinking again. I fucking hate this thing. So earlier this week, Destiny launched their latest expansion, Shadowkeep, and they also released their free-to-play base game, Destiny. I think I have this name right. Destiny 2 New Light is how they're referring to it now, right? So, I'm trying to think of any other game that's ever done this. They took the game offline for 24 hours prior to the release of Shadowkeep and the free-to-play version of it to make sure everything was right. They launched it and still ran into some pretty significant issues because of just a gigantic concurrent player base trying to log into the game. This is an article from Joseph Knopp over at IGN. Apparently, I'm just taking the information from this. Apparently, on Steam, over 200,000 players were concurrently trying to log on to Destiny, and it caused really long server queue issues, and then it just caused the game to completely crash. And so they ended up having to take it offline yet again in order to perform maintenance, and I think it was down for about an hour, I want to say, maybe a little longer than that. And so I think it's clear people are excited about getting back into Destiny, the new expansion, the free-to-play model. So let's just start there. With Destiny, I feel like we go through ebbs and flows with the popularity of this game. Where do you feel like it is now, and how do you feel like Bungie is going to capitalize on what seems to be some pretty considerable excitement here?
Well, I think it's been quiet for a while, and although the Division is kind of in the same space, I just don't think that it ever filled the space the way that Destiny did. I don't think people got as hooked into the Division as they got hooked into Destiny. And so I think bringing this game back with any kind of newness is going to drive some excitement. But I also think that they just really stand to benefit from that separation from Activision. Whether that's fair and warranted or not, I think a lot of people blame Activision for a lot of the things that they were upset with Destiny. And so I think this is a great opportunity for Bungie to really start with almost a clean slate and to be able to drive a whole new level of excitement with the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of ebbs and flows, it's kind of a pattern for games that choose to take the approach that Bungie is taking with Destiny. I mean, it's the same with World of Warcraft. You always see a massive spike in the player base whenever there's a new expansion of any kind. And I've been part of that kind of pattern. Whenever a new expansion came out, especially I think the big one that came out for Destiny 2, I jumped back in because I thought this is the time the game will finally click with me. Spoiler alert, it never did, but for many people it did. And I think I've been saying for a long time that Destiny needed a free to play option. An option. It didn't need to be free to play altogether because it was never going to be, but having that new light option is a great way to onboard people. Like, I played the demo for the original Destiny, and I thought it was a great way to get me hooked. Playing a small slice of it and then diving into it all the way in. And so obviously that has been a huge draw for people. I think it's probably been a great way for the really hardcore players to say, hey, friends who haven't played this game before, dive in while you can. Dip your toes into it, and if you love it, then dive in all the way. That game has such a hardcore player base. Like, I have a friend who has popped into to watch this show every now and again, who, I mean, he still raids in that game every single weekend. And there is a solid player base like that, but being able to expand to what we saw in terms of these numbers is pretty significant. And I hope it's a sign of their approach now that they're not with Activision. I know they stress the idea that they're going to be doing more limited content releases, but more quality and just more beefier content releases, kind of sizable expansions that really bring something new as opposed to just small seasonal updates like the Iron Banner stuff. And so I hope that's a way to kind of retain players and just bring people back in over and over again.
Yeah, I think it's cool to see a renewed excitement around Destiny more than kind of mainstream conversation around it, because I do think it's been relegated largely to the pocket of fans that try to stay connected with that game. And so seeing these stories like this about the popularity of it, seeing the excitement around the free-to-play option, which I think is a brilliant move from Destiny for all the reasons that you were saying, Cody. It's cool to see, and I am excited. Larry, you mentioned, like, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you alluded to the fact that a lot of people were saying things are going to be different now with Bungie breaking away from Activision than talking about, like, I remember the conversation was, oh, they're going to have so much more creative freedom. There's a lot of things that they wanted to put into this game wanted to do with this game that Activision wasn't going to allow them to do. And I know Bungie made a point to come out and to say, no, it wasn't like that at all. We enjoyed our time working with Activision. And while I believe that their time with Activision was definitely great, I think that they enjoyed a lot of successes with Activision, I think they downplay the fact that there are expectations that a publisher places on you that probably dictate the creative direction of your game. And it doesn't make any sense for a company who's going out on their own self-publishing for the very first time to burn a bridge by saying something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that this free-to-play move, this new model that they're trying to adopt to get new players in, is something that I'm not sure Activision would have ever allowed to happen. With, like, when has Activision ever really done anything free to play? Like, I'm legit asking.
They do those free to play, like, blackout
weekends. Yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah, but nothing this like large scale. And even with Call of Duty, people have been saying like, why don't you just break out blackout mode, make it free to play, and be able to better compete in this space? And it just never happened. And so I think it's pretty. I think it speaks volumes to the fact that the very first thing Bungie decided to do once they got outside of that partnership with Activision was create a free-to-play model. I think that we're going to see Destiny continue to play around with their monetization model and figure out what works. And this clearly worked. I mean, over 200,000 players on PC trying to get back into it on the very first day. Now, I do think it is pretty shitty that it didn't work on the first day, just because I think this is a little different than a brand new game that launches and that excitement. You know, there's a lot of people who have either stepped away from Destiny for a while, or there have been people who have written Destiny off as an option for them for whatever reason, who are wanting to come back into this game. And I think it's a little more damaging to a game as old as Destiny for the first, experience people have trying to jump back in is, oh man, we had to take it offline for server maintenance. I think it's a little less room for forgiveness there.
Especially when, not all, but some of those people quit playing over issues that they've had with how the game was managed or issues that weren't resolved in the game. They're going to be those that come back, and if their first experience is this, then the reaction is, oh, okay, well, there's still stuff screwed up. I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think we're just going to continue to see Destiny make changes, take risks, experiment with things, because they have the leash to do that now. They can afford to make some mistakes.
And I think Destiny is something they need to keep as kind of a foundation for future ventures as well. I think it's, especially going the free-to-play route, I think it's possible that Bungie can use Destiny as a consistent source of revenue to be able to pursue whatever new IP they eventually end up creating, which may or may not be a massively multiplayer game. I would not be surprised if they decide to do something a little bit more reserved in scope, and a little bit less in the looter shooter genre. I think they're always pushing themselves to do new things. But I think the continued success of Destiny would allow them to pursue whatever new IP they end up going to, which is clearly part of their plan.
Yeah, let me jump in right there because I realized I forgot to link to the story in our show notes, even though I alluded to it. This is a story from Matt Kim at IGN UK about an interview that they had with Bungie CEO Pete Parsons, in which he said that one of their goals is for Bungie to become, quote, one of the best entertainment companies, end quote, in the world by the year 2025. And the quote you're talking about, Cody, is he said, quote, "So by 2025, we have a pretty specific path to make sure we transform Destiny and that we have other franchises within the marketplace," end quote. And so it's clear that Bungie wants to create new IP. They also talk about publishing and getting more into that world. And so you're also talking about possibly finding smaller creators and helping them get their games across the finish line as a publisher. But let's jump back into that conversation you started, Cody, with this new IP. Knowing Bungie's history and their pedigree, Cody, you mentioned you expect them to do something smaller. Do you have any wishes in terms of genre, in terms of game style, outside of just something smaller than Destiny?
I don't know I know it's probably gonna be a shooter, but it's a pretty good bet. But I think smaller might not be the right word. I would be surprised to see them at least with their, or maybe not, maybe I'm going to revise what I'm saying. I think for their first IP as a kind of an independent, I would expect them to try to do something that might be a little bit more reserved, more something that we would think Bungie could do. Something a little bit more traditional might not even be the right word, but something more in line with what we've seen them do before. And I don't think that's like I don't know if that's a Halo like traditional linear single player game, but I could see them moving more into an RPG shooter area. They already obviously have the shooter pedigree, and to a certain extent they have the RPG pedigree as well with the looter shooter stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe push a little bit more into the narrative side of things, because I think that's what has continued to draw some people to Destiny, others aside from the grind and the cycle of loot. They have a pedigree when it comes to world building, and I think they know that, and they've tried to do that within the confines of a looter shooter like Destiny. But I can see that I've seen them time and time again strain against the boundaries of what that game can be when it comes to storytelling. And so I wouldn't be surprised, whether it is their next IP or an IP in the future, to pursue something more in line with like a first-person shooter RPG.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Larry?
Yeah, just looking at their history and what they excel at, I'm kind of with Cody that I would expect to see something sort of story-driven. Like Bungie they do so well in that space. But I would also love to see Bungie, like, what they could do if they were producing a multiplayer-focused game and they didn't have to worry about exerting time and energy on a story side. Because even as someone who, I've enjoyed Destiny, but I've always had like issues with it, and I've always been very critical of Destiny. But the one thing that, even when I was absolutely furious with the first Destiny game, the one thing I've never shied away from is the gunplay is just incomparable. It's so good. It feels wonderful. And so I lean toward thinking they'll go a story route. And I would love that, but there's a part of me that would really love to see Bungie just do a straight up. We're just putting out a multiplayer experience, competitive shooting experience.
Mm-hmm. I could see them doing both. On. I mean, they seem to want to do multiple IP and to really be what was the quote?
One of the biggest entertainment companies in the world by 2025.
Yeah, I mean that's an ambitious goal, but if they really want to dominate, a part of that is something that's multiplayer and can bring in the bucks over time.
Do you think the phrasing of that alludes to wanting to enter more spaces than gaming?
That's where I was gonna sit, because I side more on what you're hoping for, Larry, as what I see them pursuing because you're right. Bungie, great pedigree in terms of storytelling, in terms of world building, but they have an equally massive pedigree and historic pedigree when it comes to developing competitive arena shooters. I mean, the competitive scene of Halo 3 was massive.
Yeah.
And we are now in a world where there is money to be made hand over fist in competitive gaming and in esports. And like you said, Larry, you kind of stole the words right out of my mouth with, like, what makes Destiny so good is, yes, the gameplay loop, yes, the world building is cool, but the gunplay in that game is just unmatched by any other game. And to bring that into a competitive setting, because Destiny has cool multiplayer modes. Iron Banner is some of the most fun multiplayer experiences I've ever had in gaming, but it doesn't, as long as you've got like the looter shooter grinding mechanic, there's never going to be a competitive angle to it. So coming out and just saying we're going to focus hardcore on a 4v4 5v5 multiplayer arena-based shooter to try to like Ubisoft did with Siege. Siege was there, like, it was we are going to make an esport. That's what they did, and I think the word entertainment there is I don't think it's wise of any company to say we are going to build a video game IP that we hope goes into the television space, into the movie space. It's such a big risk. Like, there's how much success has any company been able to find in that? But esports is an entertainment segment as well that I think we can, while parallel to games and intersecting with games, which I guess is the opposite of parallel, but while intersects with games, I think you could view that as its own arm, its own entity. I mean, Fortnite hired away Nate Nanzer to lead their competitive division, so that's the route I go with it. Seeing them in the competitive space, I think, would be cool. But I also think to Guerrilla, who for years and years made Killzone and then pulled the rug out from everybody and was like, oh, we're going to make an open world action adventure RPG game. And it was fucking stellar. So I don't want to put anybody into a box and just say because you were good at one thing for so long means you need to keep doing that one thing. Bungie may want to come out and do something totally different, but yeah, I'm saying esports route.
That's what I want to see. Just because they're so good at making a fun, balanced multiplayer experience.
In map design, some of the best map design in all of competitive gaming.
And they've continued to present like new, exciting experiences, not just the typical deathmatch. Like, I actually loved the Gambit mode in Destiny 2. It was totally different than any other multiplayer mode I've ever played, and players responded to it as well. I think they're still capable of crafting really unique multiplayer shooter experiences that push against the confines of what we think about as traditional game modes. So yeah, I mean, I would love to see that. I'd also love to see them pursue the single player kind of route, or something squad based, but a little bit more confined in scope. I think the term entertainment got me thinking about something beyond gaming.
Same here.
Not just, I don't even mean esports. I think for a long time they've had, to put it lightly, cinematic ambitions with their projects, whether that's just the intro cutscenes to things. I would not be surprised if they released like a series of shorts or something within the worlds they've created. I think that'd be fascinating. That takes an entirely different team and an entirely different set of resources, but if that's an area they want to move into in a limited capacity, I would not be surprised to see them do that.
Yeah, and my thought there was not even necessarily a movie or a show based off of a game that they've already created. But I think when you look at the depth of the universe that Halo was and is because of Bungie, the books that were written, the maybe not the greatest forays into television, but there were some forays there. When you look at the depth of the story in Destiny, even when the story was told poorly, there was great creativity there. Like, my thought was, does entertainment mean that they're going to give these great writers and cinematographers and artists the opportunity to just tell a story without having to attach the gaming element to it? Like, I was wondering if they might make a step into just something totally new in the television or movie space. But yeah, I don't know.
I worry that that's a crowded space right now, and it requires a whole different understanding of kind of storytelling. And I mean, I think every company under the sun has a streaming service now. So it would largely depend on the model of distribution they choose to create for whatever avenue they choose to pursue.
Not to mention most of the people who were a part of the development of those stories have probably long since moved on to other places as well.
And there are, I mean, Showtime's making a Halo series. The legacy is still there. It's not under Bungie's control anymore.
I know this is kind of an aside. How sure is that? Because I've been
cast it already.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like I haven't paid much attention to that story because I've been hearing the rumor of the excellent Halo movie or show since I was like 14. So
Yeah. No, they cast. I think they started shooting this year. Or they're starting at the beginning of next year.
Okay, cool.
It's in the works.
Nice. All right. Let's move on. Next topic. Cody, what do you got for us this week?
Oh, I thought I was last.
You thought wrong.
Yeah. Oh, you
You're not
switched it on me last second.
So in a way you are.
All right. I want to talk about the absolute mess of a situation that's going on between acclaimed voice actor Troy Baker. I'll just say acclaimed actor Troy Baker. And Gearbox, developers of Borderlands 3. I'm going to run quickly through the background of this. But it's been a series of back and forths. So originally, back in April, Randy Pitchford, the boss over at Gearbox and a complete asshat, claimed that
It's actually one of his credentials on his Wikipedia.
it is on his business card, and it's going to be relevant to this conversation and the irony behind it. But Randy Pitchford originally claimed back in April that Troy Baker had chosen not to reprise his role as Reese, who is a character from Tales from the Borderlands, the Telltale series. Reese does appear in Borderlands 3. A few characters from Tales from the Borderlands appear in Borderlands 3. And so I guess most people would assume that Baker would kind of reprise his role. But Randy Pitchford said in April that he would not. And he claimed that it was because Troy had turned down the opportunity. Troy Baker soon responded and said that he was incredibly interested in the role. He wanted to kind of maintain the quality of performance and kind of the consistency and have those original voice actors back. And he said that they wouldn't let him for whatever reason. So there was a lot of kind of unspoken, unclear stuff going on. So recently, this week, VG247, Kirk McKean, he did a whole feature on Troy Baker and Nolan North, and as part of that feature, he was able to talk to Troy Baker and ask him what had really happened. And Troy Baker said, and I'll read this verbatim, quote, "So they came to me and they were like, 'Do you want to do this?' Which I said, absolutely. And they made it impossible for me to do the role. It had nothing to do with money. They just simply would not go about doing it the way that we needed it to be done. So then it was like, I never said no," unquote. So that's very unclear. So as a good journalist, Kirk McKean asked him to clarify what all these vagaries actually meant. And Baker said, quote, "No, it was simply a matter of they wouldn't go union. And I can't do a non-union gig. And without getting too deep into the weeds of that, we had long conversations about that. We always knew going into it that this is going to be the thing. They were going to take these characters and put them from Tales from the Borderlands series from Telltale into Borderlands proper. I've been waiting for this call. They were like, 'Do you want to do this?' And I said, yes. Because they never would move from that position. I'm not mad. It's invariably a completely different character, but it still stings." There have since been developments in the story since McKean originally published that. Gearbox released a statement saying that Texas law prevents the studio from using exclusively union actors in Borderlands 3. To which SAG-AFTRA, the representative union for screen actors, basically responded that that's complete nonsense. And I'll read from their statement quickly so we can get into the conversation. But essentially, SAG-AFTRA said there's really no law prohibiting them from using union actors, and the union wasn't asking them to use only union actors. They were just asking to see if they did use union actors like Troy Baker, that all actors across the project would be treated fairly in accordance with that. And that does mean higher standards of treatment and standard pay. Gearbox is a company that has traditionally used a lot of its own employees and a lot of kind of non-union actors for its performances. And so I'll read from the SAG-AFTRA statement, which they said, quote, Gearbox was unwilling to sign the contract and bind themselves to honoring those standards as reflected in the SAG-AFTRA contract. This is from continued Kirk McKean's reporting. This is Ray Rodriguez, who is a SAG-AFTRA's chief contracts officer. Quote, they claim to adhere to those standards anyway. We have no way to verify that, and in any event, a non-binding commitment to treat and pay workers fairly is not enough. Workers deserve the protection of an actual contract. Our contracts do not and cannot provide different terms and conditions for workers based on whether they are members of the union. Non-members would enjoy all the same contract benefits as members, whether in Texas or any other state, nor would the contract prevent them from hiring non-union actors, unquote. So this turned into quite a mess, with a lot of different parties getting involved. And it's really a story about the complexities and the benefits of what unions can bring to an industry like gaming. And so I guess before we kind of dive into any specific questions I might want to interrogate, what do you guys make of this mess? What do you make of Gearbox's position and kind of the whole ensuing onslaught of statements and quotes from all these different parties?
Well, it seems like Gearbox, the best I can do, like if I give them the benefit of the doubt, I can be like, well, maybe they just didn't understand the situation. But seeing other things from Gearbox, and particularly Randy Pitchford in the past, it's hard for me to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I feel like they just did what they wanted to do and justified it after the fact.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I need a little clarity here. So, was SAG-AFTRA saying that if they were to sign on a member voice actor, that all of the benefits they would enjoy would then have to be given also to all of the voice actors that were part of the project? So,
yes. And that becomes complicated considering that some of those are also employees of Gearbox.
Yeah.
Which Gearbox, I guess, a point of clarification and context. Another voice actor who originally played Claptrap earlier this year, he did not reprise his role in Borderlands 3 as well. And it was largely because Gearbox wouldn't give him additional pay and compensation for lending his voice to the project. And Claptrap, if you know Claptrap, talks a lot. He's a very chatty robot.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not the first time they've run into issues in terms of compensating their actors and their employees.
So Ashley Birch is a voice in this game, right?
She does, yes.
And she's a member of SAG-AFTRA.
As far as I'm aware.
So how does that work?
So, as far as I understand, SAG-AFTRA employees and actors can do non-union projects, but they're credited differently. They can be reprimanded by the union, and oftentimes you'll see this happened in animation a lot in the 90s. People would operate under pseudonyms because of the way the union would respond to them doing non-union jobs. I haven't gotten to the credits yet in Borderlands, so I don't even know if she is credited. I would assume she is, but there have been no credits in this game so far.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that she's in an uncredited kind of additional voices role, but she's a pretty major character, so I doubt it.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you for the clarity. I mean, I'm with you. I think that it obviously doesn't reflect well on Gearbox to not want to enter into a contract because they don't want to give protections to everybody. And while I think we all agree that should be what a company wants to do, to provide the best working environment and the best compensation, I do think you bring up a good point, Cody, when you say there is a bevy of complexity when you start to recognize that a lot of these parts are handshake deals of, hey, you work here, you are a character artist for this, would you like to voice this individual as well? And how does that play into other kinds of compensation agreements that they may have with individual departments? If this individual gets these benefits, and for how long do they get the benefits? Is it just for the duration of the project? Is it for the duration of their employment here? Like, there's a level of complexity within it where it makes sense why a company would look at it and say, we don't want to tread into those waters because it's too murky. It doesn't make it right, but I'm just saying it makes sense. But that's where we get to the part of unionization that's so important, which is that it only works well when you reach a tipping point in which everywhere you turn to find somebody to fill these roles, there are individuals that everybody is a part of this union. You know, you have to aggressively recruit people to join these unions so that companies can't just decide to go out. But the whole defense also of we're not allowed to discriminate about union or non-union is bullshit when you think about the fact that they've been given this contract and they clearly discriminated because of inclusion in a union. Like, the right to work argument makes sense when you look at it on the surface of like, oh, well, we can't look at a non-union person and say, well, we can't hire you because we're only going after union people. But it totally falls apart when you look at this was the reason that they didn't allow Troy Baker to reprise his role.
Yeah, I mean, this gets to kind of a point. We've been talking about unionization a lot on this show, and I think it's interesting here because you do see, I mean, it does pose a point of complexity for a company, although Gearbox could 100% afford to pay the actors the union rates if they chose to. It's not like they're a small company. They're a pretty massive company. And based on the sales numbers for Borderlands 3, they're going to have even more moving forward. There's an inherent irony to the company that has made a game about massive corporations fucking people over doing the same to its own employees and to members of a union. Borderlands is a series that constantly makes fun of corporate culture and corporate assholes. And is a company that is currently run by a corporate asshole who pennies and takes money out of the company coffers, and clearly has screwed over voice actors in the past. I just think there's like you said, Larry, there's a certain point at which you stop giving them the benefit of the doubt, and that passed a long time ago. I don't want to hold a whole company accountable for the actions of its boss, but at a certain point, the policies of the company start to reflect that person. And so I kind of think that's this whole situation has revealed a lot of complexities about kind of the way this stuff works, but I don't think it excuses anything that Gearbox has done here.
Mm-hmm.
I do kind of want to address, we've talked about the benefits of the benefits of union work in the past, the benefits of what it means to be in a union. There are many, but clearly, as you said, Luke, it also presents a complexity when you can find alternatives to union workers. And it also presents a complexity when in an industry like the voice acting and voice work industry, a large reason why you see Troy Baker and Nolan North and Catherine Hale and all these actors you hear over and over again, a large reason you hear their voices over and over again is because, unfortunately, the SAG-AFTRA union for voice acting is still relatively limited in its scope, meaning a lot of the companies are hiring union actors, but that pool of union actors is so small that you're going to see Laura Bailey pop up over and over again in games. She's one of the most notable actresses in the game, but I saw a lot of talk about the way that voice acting has essentially created kind of like a two caste system where you're either a Troy Baker or you're an unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's largely just because the industry is still catching up. That's at least how I see it. It's a union that's still gaining traction. I mean, they only really negotiated a deal how many years ago?
Yeah, like 3.
Yeah, like 3 years ago. So it's still something that's building. But it does show you kind of the complexities of a working union when that union is still building itself.
Well, and when you start to think about where a lot of these studios are located, when you're thinking about Texas and North Carolina, those are the two big ones that come to mind. Like, those are right to work states where, you know, you can't be preferred or denied based on your membership into a union. So that adds a level to it as well when all these companies are just looking to minimize the expense in creating these games.
Definitely.
I feel ignorant in this discussion anytime we talk about unions, and I've heard a little from both sides. I work with a guy who was a mechanic for a long time, and he despises unionization because of the headaches that came with it in his area of the world. But I'm also from West Virginia, where I don't know how much you've read about the mine wars, but there were people that were essentially indentured servants, and unionization like liberated large swaths of people from where I'm from. So I recognize the good and the benefit, but I also recognize the headache and the transition. But just because a thing is difficult doesn't mean it's not worth undertaking.
Well, of course.
But corporations won't undertake the difficult thing until it becomes more convenient to undertake it.
And almost every single large stride we've had in whether it is improving work conditions or compensation for work, almost all of those have been led by unions that have called for those things. And, you know, I think back to some of the demands of the voice actor strike, video game voice actor strike. I mean, some of the ridiculous things that they were being asked to do, you know, 12-hour recording sessions and having to record screams over and over and over again. And like, yeah, it's not getting black lung or working in a unventilated factory or anything like that, but there are still real world ramifications to these things that are being asked of these voice actors. And on the other side of that coin, you have so many people who are willing to undercut those individuals who are seeking those protections and consider it the grind. You know, I'm making my sacrifices in order to get my foot in the door here. So they're willing for these companies that don't want to hire union workers because they don't want to have to limit themselves based off of the things that they say. There's always some Joe Schmo who's like, I'll scream into a microphone for 16 hours with no regard for my future well-being. And companies are just like, all right, cool. Yeah, we'll hire you.
Scabs.
What?
Scabs.
I don't know what that means.
So when the unions would strike in the mines, I assume this word's used outside of the mine strikes, but the workers that would come in and take their place and just suffer the conditions because, hey, it's a paycheck. They were called scabs.
Yeah.
Derogatorily.
Yeah. And I mean, this is an even more competitive industry than that, you know, in these creative industries.
Aren't lining up to go into the mines.
Yeah.
But people would love to get into the gaming space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's something that it does. I mean, that's kind of a symptom of capitalism in general. There's always going to be a space to fill. Someone to fill it. Corporations and companies will take advantage of that. But I mean, the reason unions are set up is so that despite the fact that Gearbox claims they meet or exceed union standards, that's an unspoken, not contractual agreement, which is not what you want as someone who's going to be yelling into a microphone for 16 hours.
And I feel like it's obviously not true, or they would have had no problem.
Oh, yeah.
Troy Baker. They'd be, oh, yeah, we're exceeding those standards already. Like, it wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah. It's kind of this has revealed the inner workings of so many elements of the industry. I think it's kind of been a valuable case study, but I also think it's a case study, and this is something I wanted to use as my topic a few weeks ago when I first started playing Borderlands. But I feel like the company's policies have started to mirror the design philosophies of the studio, in that they are severely lagging behind the times in every aspect. I mean, I mentioned the fact that some of these jokes sounded like they were written in 2015. And that's something you can kind of ignore because you're just going to be shooting things and you'll be listening to a podcast for all you care.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit harder to ignore when their behind the times policies are kind of actively hurting the voice acting industry and kind of creating rifts within their own company where people end up leaving because they're not being compensated fairly. So I did just kind of want to address very quickly as kind of a closing note. I know neither of you guys have played Borderlands 3. I'm sure you have heard some of the press around Borderlands 3, not just in terms of behind the scenes stuff, but about the game itself. Where do you see this series and this company kind of in the grand landscape of gaming? Obviously, the game was a massive success, despite its many flaws, and despite the fact that it might be a tired old formula and a tired old company.
Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
It may be a tired formula, a tired company, but it's a niche that a lot of people enjoy, and one that's not really overcrowded right now. I mean, you could throw Destiny, you could throw Division in that same space, but those are really very different games. Like you can't listen to a podcast and keep up with those games. I mean, some of the loot grind you can, but the story, like all that's very important in those games. The social aspect is very important in those games. But just like a mindless find a bajillion guns and just shoot everything, like it's kind of a unique thing. And so, to be honest, I've been surprised by the success of the game because I thought it's old, it's outdated, it looks like it was made in 2015. I had no interest in playing it, but clearly, like the desire for that type of game is there, and I don't think it has a lot of real direct competition.
Yeah,
so I think they can keep doing the formula.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that saturated fats and potato chips are terrible for you, but yet potato chips still get made and still get sold, and it's because people want those things from time to time. And I think the same has been proven with Borderlands and with the success of 3. Now, if they were to come out with a new Borderlands every 2 years, I think it would get tired and stale at some point. But I think as long as they're waiting years between these releases and releasing Battleborns in between, people are gonna love when they get their hands on. That was the name of the game, right? Battleborn. Yeah, okay.
I was just laughing at the game, not at you.
Introduced me to Alt J, though, so with that awesome reveal trailer that they had. Yeah. So there was something good that came out of Battleborn. But, so I think as long as they don't try to wear it out, there's always, I think, going to be a space for Borderlands out there that people are going to attach themselves to. And the people that attach themselves to that are rarely, in like a hardcore way, are rarely the people that care about these issues that we're talking about today, which may be reductive, but I don't think it's false.
Yeah, you're right. Michael Bay's still making movies.
It's true for Netflix as well. I just sort of, I mean, I bought the game, so I'm part of the problem. I'll openly admit.
Thanks, Cody.
But I wonder what the next Borderlands looks like, if there is one. I mean, there probably will be one if they've sold 5 million copies. I wonder if they try to do something different. But I guess much more concerning to me is the fact that they're unwilling to do anything different when it comes to their internal workings and internal policies. I can forgive, not so much forgive, I can ignore a really lazy game that relies on just outdated mission design, some lazy kind of borderline terrible writing. But when your company still operates like it's in the 90s and treats people like it's at the start of an industry, that's kind of when I start to become a little bit more critical. And I mean, I'm surprised. I guess I'm not surprised. Like, the sales of the game speak for them. The sales of the game speaks for itself. But there was so much negative press around this game leading up to it, and it didn't make a single ounce of difference, which kind of leaves me feeling defeated in some ways. I don't know.
I guess I firmly cemented myself as a cynic on this podcast. But I just think so few people, in the first place, the number of people who are paying attention to those stories is low. And then the number of people that
Twitter feed.
Yeah. And then the number of people that care about it. Like, even thinking about movies, like, that industry has been around for decades. And I feel like it's only been in the last 5-10 years that we've been making any meaningful strides for work conditions for anyone that's not a white guy, So I feel like we're probably still a long way out from these kinds of things dramatically affecting the sales of a game. And I don't like it, but I just feel like that's how it is.
Yeah, and we read the YouTube comments and we see these things being shared on social media and the commentary that goes around those from just the general populace. And it's not even that the people who read these don't care. It's that they're combative to the messaging and the changes that need. And like, I don't get that. Like, I get your corporate loyalty to Gearbox and your praise of Randy Pitchford as supreme leader or whatever. Like, but to bitch about the fact that people want better work conditions and yet Gearbox is standing in the way of allowing that to happen. Like, I don't know what part of your frontal lobe has to be missing in order for you to not be able to, like, empathize with individuals who are just trying to make a better way for themselves. And that the only reason they can't have that better way is because leaders like Randy Pitchford just want to save a buck.
Yeah. Well, it's selective cultural compartmentalization. I don't think once you start connecting the person who has created something and their actions with the thing that they've created and trying to reconcile those two, it forces you to kind of look at every single thing that you enjoy and is created like that. I think people will put up with a lot of absolute nonsense and bullshit before they even think to kind of question a purchase for something they are really a really big fan of.
On the combativeness side of it, I think a lot of that is influenced by the way people perceive work in the arts in particular. I think it's often not perceived as real work, right? So you're not trying to break your back in the mines. You're yelling into a mic, "Oh, big deal, 12 out," and that's not how I feel at all. But I think that's how a lot of people feel. They're like, "That's not real work. It's not real work. It's this gatekeeping mindset." And I don't think that's fair. But again, people.
At the same time, those are people's work who we've enjoyed for like hundreds of hours at a time. So
I think it is. I think it being Troy Baker's name attached to it.
Yeah,
because Troy Baker is like universally beloved in the video game industry. I think that may give the story a little more gravity than if it was even any other SAG voice actor outside of Nolan North. Maybe like if there was going to be somebody who had this complaint, Troy Baker would be the one you'd want because it would carry more weight.
Yeah, and something like this came up with Ashley Birch for Life is Strange. I remember. I don't think that got nearly the amount of play that this got, and there are obviously a number of reasons for that, probably both in terms of fame and in terms of gender. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the fact that this is Troy Baker, who's essentially the most ubiquitous voice actor of the moment, is pretty notable.
Yeah.
and probably will give this, hopefully spark a conversation, although he hasn't released a statement since the story was published.
All right. Let's move on. Larry, what is your topic for us today? I just realized I got a bunch of weird direct messages from like Korean Twitch accounts.
Nice.
Really big in Korea.
All right. Yeah, apparently.
So I want to talk about this new season of Apex. We've talked about Apex Legends several times recently. They've had a little run of bad press. And in fact, you, Luke, you hadn't played since they called you a freeloader because you weren't buying their $18 skins.
Yeah. Fuck me, right? That's why I own a house, because I make those kinds of financial decisions.
So anyway, and I sat out the game for a few weeks, but I love the game enough that whatever, I jump back in. I'm not going to spend any more money on it for a while. But this season brought a lot of big changes to the game, and we all have jumped in and played a little bit, at least a couple of hours of it. And so I just wanted to kind of go through and let's talk about the changes they've brought. First, we're going to talk about the changes, and then I want to talk about what these changes do for the trajectory of the game. If anything, does this move the needle on the bad press? Does this show any sign of improving the way this game has been managed? So first off, a lot of the characters got some tweaks, some buffs and nerfs, and I don't want to go through all of that, but they are actively managing the game, trying to improve the quality of life on that front. But obviously the big change is that they've dropped a brand new map. And so if you haven't jumped in yet or seen the trailer yet, the map it's a really interesting map. It's fire and ice, essentially. This factory had this chemical explosion that just froze everything on one side of the map, but it was also a volcanic region. So there's ice, there's lava, and in between there's like a hot spring region. So drop it into that map. What are your initial impressions of it? What are your thoughts on it? Yeah.
I thought there was a notable size difference in the map. And playing it last night, it felt bigger, and it also felt a little denser in terms of the areas, and maybe not in named areas with a lot of really great loot, but just a lot more buildings kind of interspersed throughout in between the named areas, to where it didn't feel like, oh, you're running through a fucking field for 2.5 minutes to try to get to any form of civilization. So I appreciated that. I thought there was
before you move on from that, I just want to weigh in there. Like, there are several cities on the map that feel like cities.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just Skulltown. There are several towns with multiple buildings with multiple stories. So yeah, that's a great observation.
Yeah, I also thought the game looked brighter, and maybe that's the map design from there as well. I like the uniqueness in those kind of like 3 distinct areas as well, with the fire, the ice. I was surprised that there's liquid that appears to be toxic that when you touch it doesn't hurt you, but yet there is lava that if you touch it, it does hurt you, and there's no impact if you touch the ice. So I thought that was a weird decision, but overall I think the new map is cool, and I love those maps. Can get stale playing on them over and over and over and over again. This coming from a guy who watches a shitload of League of Legends, so which is all played on a singular map. But yeah, it was a welcome change, definitely.
It's impossible to kind of like understate or overstate, I guess, how good Respawn is at map design.
Yeah.
And this is something I think a lot of people forgot from Titanfall. But I think this is a reminder of that. Not only is the map like visually impressive, the style, like, it is much more vibrant. I feel like the colors like, there's a lot of bright greens and a lot of bright reds, contrasted with the blues. The map is in terms of design is just awesome. There are a lot of really unique mechanics within the individual areas. Like I remember saying we should go to Geyser last night when we were playing, and I went to Geyser today, and I mean it's a series of small buildings, but there are the titular geysers there that you can kind of use to, it shoots you up and you can then use to jettison yourself away from an encounter if you kind of get in too thick. The train is a really interesting addition, and I think really, really good players will be able to use that to their advantage, and really be able to like, well, they'll destroy me with it, but I didn't know that you could stop it if you get to the front of the car, which is really cool. So there are a lot of like really just interesting mechanical additions to this particular map. I also just like the way it's laid out and designed. Like you said, Luke, I think it seems like there are a lot more open, long sight lines punctuated by like really claustrophobic urban areas, kind of more confined than in the other map. There aren't as many, I don't think there are as many mountains around, so the sightlines are a bit longer and they're just kind of like massive open fields. But when you get into the cities, it's a completely different game, and there are multiple cities, which I think is awesome. So I'm much more impressed by this map edition than I was with PUBG's, which sort of I'd never really got into. I always liked that traditional first map more, but I could easily see myself, if they give you the option of choosing between the maps, choosing this one over Kings Canyon.
Yeah, I was also just I was thrilled with this. The play of fire and ice, it is really vibrant. The uniqueness of areas. I was actually upset by how you don't take damage from the water that looks like it's going to destroy you. Because one of the things I was hoping for in this game when we saw the preview was that it would be really easy to get stuck somewhere if you weren't careful in observing where you were going to go. So that hope did not come to fruition for me. For the most part, you got to really screw up to get trapped by the lava. But that being said, like the rest of the map is so different. I was afraid it would just be more of the same, but it is a very distinct. You have to play it different. I've been struggling to adapt my play style, because in Kings Canyon, I play Pathfinder, and my gameplay style is utilize the height advantage, take the high ground, and then descend on your opponent from out of nowhere and destroy them. And outside of the cities, it is hard to find a height advantage to really leverage. You're forced to engage the sniper battles or to find someone and just go head to head with them. The addition of an underground area, that's been really cool. A great deal of the map is underground. There are some vaults that are going to unlock next week, apparently. And that's interesting to me. The map is already alive and going to change within a week of its release. Having the trains instead of the drop ships, having those drones that you shoot out of the sky that drop packages. I like that it is so different from Kings Canyon. Because I expected you to still have the same drop ships, the same airdrops coming in. So yeah, it is a breath of fresh air, and I already miss Kings Canyon. I can't wait till it's worked back in. But once it's back in, I won't be playing it exclusively. I hope to have like kind of a rotation where I'm getting about half and half of playing these maps eventually.
Yeah, on the verticality note, there's a ton of verticality on this map, almost to the point where it makes me a little sad because it reminds me of the movement abilities that we have in Titanfall that aren't available to us in Apex. Like really Pathfinder and Octane, I think those are really the only two characters that have any kind of vertical abilities. Everybody else has to, find stairs and climb the short distance of a wall that you can climb. So I'd love to see in a map like this them introduce some more verticality mechanics into the characters, like universally, that could be taken advantage of, just because I don't feel like I can fully take advantage of that height without playing one of those two characters.
Yeah. Even something as even if they didn't want to make it universal, like adding the pilot jump gear as a pickup item, and then all of a sudden I've got the wall running abilities and that kind of thing. I think that might be a neat addition.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why they cut them out for King's Canyon, because it would have just made the map it would have made the game go way too quickly. But I think in this map is a whole different ball game.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of the fact that they did completely take out the original map and put this one in, and they didn't come with a rotation?
I think it was the way to go. If you want people to, I think most people are hesitant to try something new when it is challenging. Like for me, I was to the point where I was destroying people in Kings Canyon, and I am struggling to do well on this map. And there were points last night where I was like, I kind of wish I could just go back and play Kings Canyon. But I'm glad that I don't have that option, because I'm forced to learn this new map and adapt and get comfortable with it. So yeah. It's a strange choice. I can see some people being upset about it, but I think it's the right call if you want people to really adopt this map as something that they want to play regularly.
Mm-hmm.
You also risk splitting the player base. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know how many people would willingly choose to do a new map. I think people would try it and then just end up going back to what's comfortable. But I think forcing everybody to play on this map is an interesting choice, and I think one that I hope people have been receptive to. I haven't really looked at any of the forums or anything since it's opened up.
Yeah, and I was talking more of like a map pool, like they did with PUBG when they started to announce new maps, where it was just you load it in and it was like, oh, okay, well, I got Erangel this time, and
I think they'll end up doing that, right? Makes sense.
I think they'll go that way. And they've talked, like in the cutscene introducing the map, they talked about, we're in universe, we're working on a way to figure out how we can take the tournament back to Kings Canyon or whatever. But so I think that's coming. But I am glad they did it this way. Also because, so if you can pick a map, you're going to split the fan base. But if it's in a pool and I really want to play this map, Battle Royale games can take so long that I'm not guaranteed any kind of, like, anywhere near the level of playtime that I want to have on this map.
Yeah.
So
you'll get a lot of people who also quit to get the map that they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also remember back in PUBG, I mentioned PUBG as the example. I don't think it went well when they did the map pool to start. I think people definitely had their preference. And that's why they added back in, like, oh, just play Erangel.
Mm-hmm. I hadn't put this in the notes because I had forgotten about it till we talked about quitting to get the map you want. But an addition they made is there is now a punishment for quitting. And I think that's worth talking about. The first time you quit, there's a 5-minute penalty. And
is this in ranked?
I think it's in any game mode.
Because I was quitting like crazy when I was playing earlier and didn't do anything.
Maybe it is just in ranked then. Okay, that makes me feel a little better about it. Because 5 minutes for the first offense is a pretty big deal.
We've been playing Overwatch long enough. We're used to it.
You can get to the point where you're banned for a week. That's the maximum. So I'm glad it's only the one game mode, especially due to the drop issues that the game tends to have, which aren't terrible, but they aren't absent either. The other major addition is the new character, Crypto. He's a hacker type character. His ability is he can stop wherever he's at and send this drone out, and you switch to the drone's view and you can fly all around, and it's got a pretty crazy range on it, and it can highlight enemies, and your teammates see where those enemies are highlighted by the drone. And the drone can be shot out of the sky, and then it takes 40 seconds for it to come back into play. And he has an ultimate that releases an EMP, drops 50 shield, and slows people down. So again, really unique character, added to a pool of unique characters. What are your thoughts on Crypto? I know you guys haven't had a chance to play him yet, but you've had to play against him.
I think he I was just playing with randos earlier today, and he presents a really interesting role. There's no kind of like support role in that way where you could just kind of sit back and mark enemies. There hasn't been one like that, at least as of yet. And it does, I mentioned yesterday when we were playing, it reminds me a lot of the first phase of offense in a siege game, where you're just kind of like navigating the environment with your drone and marking everything, marking all the enemies so you can identify them and kind of recognize where they are. It presents it creates anxiety as playing against him, because there's a really distinct audio cue when you know the drone is flying around you. And then it'll kind of pop up drone detected or something when it's near. And that character is, his lore is kind of based around paranoia. And so I think to be able to breed that in players who are playing against him is a really interesting design choice. I also just think visually the character is cool, and I love the vocal performance. I think the vocal performances for most of the characters are pretty cool. But his little short they released ahead of his official drop was awesome. The little animated short, it makes me again want one of these games to just like release a series of short films. I don't know. I figured I realized that I kind of really liked the Titanfall lore when I was watching that short, because it's once you dig into it, that provides a lot of really cool insights into the world. And kind of why the map evolved, the Kings Canyon map evolved. There's some cool kind of hints as to him being the one who kind of orchestrated that. So I like him overall. I haven't played as him, but he's going to be the first new character I buy when I can.
Yeah, I think from a competitive standpoint, his kit is a little limited in the sense of how much impact he's going to have in, especially as like you go up in competitive rank and stuff, just because he's very passive. When you're using the drone, you're out of combat, and the game is so reliant on 3v3 team fights, and I feel like it's easy to get the drop on a team if they've got a guy who's just kind of camped in the back using his drone. So which is the way I think about these characters for the most part, of like, how do they interact together? How do they synergize with one another?
But it's also a trade-off, because he does give you the drop on other teams, and that he can inform you of where they are. Yeah.
If you spot them far enough out. Yeah.
And if you're playing with people who you can talk to.
Exactly. Yeah. That too. Like, and I know that I think you get outlined if you're tagged by a friendly, you get outlined if you're tagged by crypto, so that the other team can see you. So I think there's a way to leverage it even if you're not talking with one another. But yeah, it's a 50-50. Like, hey, I'm going to hide under these stairs and get the drone out. Like it happened to Larry last night. He was under the stairs looking through his drone, and I'm sure you can recall it if a team fight breaks out, but
you can pop out of it immediately, but you've got to maintain that awareness. And it helps to have your teammate yell, "Hey man, that guy's about to..." Like, I wound up getting dropped by that guy, but if you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have even got a shot off on him.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think the kit is cool. I think the more defensive characters we get like that, and I think the more interesting compositions you're going to be able to create, because everybody outside of Watson has really kind of offense, and Gibraltar.
And Caustic.
Yeah, Caustic's got some defensive abilities too.
Yeah.
For me, Crypto is a big game changer because he ruins what I'm good at. We were streaming last night, Luke, and you pointed out at one point I was trying to flee to respawn you guys, and I'm pretty disciplined. I will stay hidden for 3 straight minutes just to get that res off. But I was forced to move sooner than I would have wanted to, because I heard that drone flying around, and I knew that if I got pinged, I was done. And so, if I'd been able to wait, I wouldn't have wound up running toward the respawn beacon that wound up getting used, because it would have gotten used. Like, the whole game would have gone differently. It ruins my sneaking around on the high ground, because that's where you're exposed to the drone. So I've felt very impacted by Crypto. But yeah, it's another unique character. And the more they add of these characters, the more unique compositions, like you said, we're gonna get. Yeah.
I like that his ultimate is essentially a pretty hard counter to Watson and Caustic.
Yeah.
There hasn't really been one in the game, so I think that the more characters they create, the more they're able to kind of like create pretty solid counters for each character, which is what Siege has been so good at doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Overwatch has not been good at doing.
Yes.
As far as the utility of that outside of destroying traps, I think it's really good for wiping a team out, but you've got to have the coordination of him popping that EMP right as your team is ready to go in and start getting the kills. And so that's where the challenge is going to be there.
Does the EMP emanate from the drone or from him?
From the drone. And in fact, if your drone's on cooldown, you can't use the EMP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we got a new gun, the charge rifle, that a lot of people be familiar from Titanfall with, except it does damage while you're charging it up person as well. It's a pretty fun game. They've added some gun attachments and they've taken some out just to maintain a balance of the kind of loot that spawns into the world. I'm just running through a couple more changes real quick. You guys can jump in if I miss something that's important to you. But this is the first battle pass that I've not been completely disappointed with. You buy the battle pass, you get a few kind of neat skins, but then the 3 skins you unlock over the course of the battle pass are really cool, I think. The ice Caustic with the ice cream emblem on his chest. Not Caustic,
Pathfinder.
Thank you. Caustic does have a skin and it's all right. The Lifeline skin is awesome. Just this devil creature. It reminds me of the in Overwatch, Symmetra. She has a skin similar to that, the dragon skin.
Yeah.
But I'm still not like super thrilled with the battle pass. I think it still has room for improvement, but it does continue to improve each time. And although I'm not spending any money on this game quite yet, I did have the gold coins just saved up to outright get this one. So I'll be working my way through it. So a lot of big changes this patch. Do you think this is enough to increase the longevity of the game? Is this going to keep roping people back in? Are you guys back into playing this? Does this offset some of that negative publicity? How are you feeling about these changes?
Well, personally, am I back into it? I mean, I'll play, but I'm not really a hardcore battle royale guy to begin with. Yeah. So I'm as back in as I'm going to be likely. So
yeah,
and I think should they have handled the Reddit stuff differently? Yes. Is it something that's going to sink the game in the long haul? I don't think it is, and I don't think it should be. It was a mistake, and just be better moving forward, and we can get over it. And but in terms of the actual substance of the update, and I think there's a lot of interesting things to be learned from this with the new map. I think we're reaching the end of the kinds of new content that you can expect to see in this game. And now it's going to be stepping back and assessing like what's been the most successful at drawing players back in. Because Respawn has been very intentional about saying we want to avoid crunch. We want to avoid the constant churn of content that these games often require. And so with the new map, with all these new gun attachments and the new like loot drop rotations, things like that, I think there's enough changes for them to step back and say, okay, what's working, what's not working, what can we dedicate more resources to and take some resources away from. And I think we're really going to see them hopefully doing more interesting things on the map side, because I think that's going to bring more people in than even new characters will, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I agree. Like that's the biggest draw to me here. Like I kind of can't wait to hop back on and explore this map some more. And the work that goes into that, though, like I just want to appreciate that, to create a map of that scale. Because you think about how many maps are in a typical shooter, right? And what is a battle royale map but a bunch of tiny arenas clustered together into one big landscape? And all those little arenas have to be fun to play in addition to the spaces between those arenas. And so I appreciate that a lot of work is obviously into this. And I don't know how often you can be dropping new maps and of this scale and expecting them to be great, but reworking them, like I think about Fortnite. Fortnite's demonstrated that even small tweaks to a map are enough to draw people in with curiosity because they want to see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the in terms of the longevity, I think the map is a good start. I think, as you said, that's what's kept me coming back. I mean, I do want to eventually get crypto, but it's so rare for a battle royale to release another map that's this good. I think this is the only battle royale I can think of that has two really solid maps. I mean, its only other competition is PUBG,
and most of their maps suck.
Yeah, and I think the other two, other than I haven't played the third one, but the other there are four because they were going to release a winter one too.
Yeah, there's like a desert, a winter, and a real small one. Yeah,
there's like a rainforest kind of thing. And those other two are not they just don't capture the magic of that first one. But I mean, going onto this map made me feel like I felt the first time jumping onto Kings Canyon. Like I was kind of in awe. Like you said, I just couldn't wait to explore every kind of nook and cranny of this map. I wanted to see, oh, that area looks really interesting, just from a visual perspective. Let me try jumping there, see what's up. And so I do think, I mean, something like this will inevitably, I mean, as we talked about with Destiny, new content drops always bring people back or kind of incite more engagement. And this is the first new map they've dropped, so we'll see if it actually recaptures people for a longer amount of time. I think it will, just because people will want to watch those really popular streamers try to get a grasp of this map.
Yeah, the extra content's what's going to keep people coming back, and I think that's where a lot of the complaints have been with Apex, is just the quality of the extra content that's been added as far as skins and that kind of thing. But as they're trying to balance the need to create content with a healthy work ethic and not burning out workers, I think that they're striking a good balance. Would I like to see a little more in terms of skins and that kind of thing? Yeah, but if this is the level of content I can expect, and they're not pushing people into crunch, like, I am personally satisfied with it.
Yeah,
I'll need a little more skin wise if they want me to keep spending real life money on battle passes. And I'm never going to drop $18 on a skin. You call me a freeloader or whatever you want, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I will keep playing the game with the level of stuff that's coming out.
Yeah, it's a small thing, but the way they teased and then revealed crypto is kind of I feel like the ideal way to do it, even though it did sort of leak and people had found him. But like putting him on the map, integrating his lore with the previous map, this is how you do it, not the long prolonged alternate reality game that was Sombra.
Yeah.
And it's a small thing. I mean, not everybody really cares about that. They just end up caring. They just care about how they end up playing the game. But for me, I think that stuff keeps me interested in the game outside of when I'm even playing it. So the more they can do that, I think this showed that they can. So I hope they continue to do that.
All right. Well, that's all I've got.
All right, awesome. Well, let's wrap it up here then, guys. Good show, good discussion. No game this week. We're gonna chat about adding some new stuff to the show and to replace the game that Cody won, Codsworth Coddington, champion of the world. So we're gonna get out of here. Let's go around the circle. Who are you? Where can people find you? And what are you going to be tweeting about this week? Larry, let's start with you.
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at StillInFlux, and I am still very.
Oh,
You cut out.
Yeah, you cut out.
Am I back?
Yep, you're back.
Yes.
So you can find me at Still Influx on Twitter. And I'm still tweeting very politically right now, so don't follow me if you want to avoid that. But I'm also working in some spooky stuff because it is my favorite time of the year.
All right. Codsworth.
My name's Cody. You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer. Hopefully I'm going to be tweeting about some stories I'm working on for the paper, which I'm super excited about. I got caught up with work this past week, but I just tweeted out the second movie review I wrote for the paper that I'm super proud of. I wrote about Ad Astra, the new Brad Pitt science fiction movie. Trying to do more movie reviews. That is an area that film is something I've wanted to write about for a long time. So hopefully I'll be getting more bylines and publications in that area. But other than that, I'll probably just continue tweeting about Succession because that's what I'm doing.
Oh, I need to start Succession. I've been watching.
Do it.
I've been watching The Righteous Gemstones.
Oh, I love that show.
And enjoying that. But I've heard a lot of great things about Succession, so I need to hop in.
Have you been misbehaving?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm just playing car pranks on my friends. So
I saw somebody overlay that theme song with that Goose Game.
Yes, I saw that as well.
What's that game called?
Untitled Goose Game.
Goose Game.
Yeah. I'm Luke. You can find me on Twitter at LukePVA. League of Legends World started today, and it is consuming my life. It's awesome. So I'm probably going to be tweeting about that. So follow me there. This has been PvA Radio, the weekly gaming podcast where each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article. And Cody, what do we want people to do with that?
We want them to create alternate acronyms for what CAFA could stand for. And then also spam that emote in the chat.
That's right. We do this every single week over on twitch.tv/PvA Radio at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you can't catch it live, you can watch it the very next day on youtube.com/PvA Radio, where we break it out topic by topic, or you can watch it in its entirety. Or you can listen to us on podcast services everywhere, including Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Luminary, where we will be allowing Conan O'Brien to do ad reads on our show to revolutionize our show as well. But guys, this was fun, and until next time, we love you. Goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?